You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Ask Drone U. Today we've got our specialist on GPS here in the house, in the studio. Well, we're actually not at the studio at all.
No.
We are at the NTSB Training Academy, where we are conducting a training this week and also launching some new software. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But as we've been getting into survey grade mapping and highly precise, accurate mapping, there seems to be a problem amongst a lot of drone mappers. And Josh, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
There's a problem with this nomenclature of PPK, RTK. What are we talking about? Well, in this alphabet soup, we're actually talking about GPS. And GPS is something that is actually very complicated. It's not something that is just, throw in a little beef, throw in a little seasoning, put it on the barbecue, and voila, we've got a great plate of food. It is not gonna work that way. So here to help us understand is Joshua Baker, who is also teaching part of our survey grade mapping class, which should be out by the beginning of next year, so check that out. But Josh, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to be here. Love training, and it's going to be a fun week.
It is going to be a really fun week. Today we got to sit inside of TWA Flight 800. We got to fly a simulator. We got to go around and check out all the cool Huey aircraft, but we were also checking out some new GPS equipment. I guess it's not really new, but it's something that the NTSB was looking at. And I think it's really important for people to understand why GPS and a firm understanding of GPS is so important for precise, highly accurate mapping. I mean, for example, is a drone that says it's an RTK drone, is it really real-time kinematic GPS information that's going to be able to be used for mapping? In most cases, the answer is
no.
That's correct. Now, what else are we going to learn? Well, we're going to learn that I was actually wrong in how I defined RTK also in earlier episodes. I said, what did I say? Real-time kinetic?
It's real-time kinematic.
So a little correction there for me. But also, we want to explain to you the differences between RTK and PPK GPS, but also the differences of terrestrial RTK and terrestrial PPK versus aerial, or essentially drone version RTK. So let's get started, Josh. What is RTK GPS terrestrially?
Okay, so terrestrially you have an antenna, and that antenna then takes signals, and within real time, it's broadcasted corrections from a network that is in place throughout the U.S.
So if I understand this correctly, a GPS unit that's on the ground terrestrial, that's RTK, is connected to the internet, which is connected to stations nearby that apply corrections to your GPS unit in order to actually get accurate centimeter grade data.
Correct, yeah.
And so the key for that then is having the internet connection?
Yes, it's having that connection to the, we call them, there's CORS networks, there's the N-Trip network. And so it's just basically different networks that apply correction to your GPS equipment within real time.
And typically, the way that you have these corrections is that you're also setting up your GPS unit to be in a specific area or region. Is that correct?
Correct. And so that goes really deep into your coordinate systems and things like that. So with that, it's basically just different models that your map is based off of.
Gotcha. So these different regions, these different networks, they essentially have a unique set of data, right? And it's called, what is it called? The geiod error? Is that right?
Yes, you have a geiod or ellipsoid error.
Gotcha. But the geiod error is what is essentially being applied to our data when we're connecting our GPS over the network, right?
Yes. Well, so a geiod error is just an error. Like depending on what your model is based off of, like what a geoid is a gravitational model, and so that's what that error is.
Gotcha. Now let me ask you this: PPK GPS terrestrially. What is PPK and what is the typical workflow?
So PPK is post-process kinematic. So that's a collection technique where you have a base antenna, and that can be a cores network or something. You want to keep a baseline really short. I want to say it's within 15 to 20 kilometers or whatever. I like working in metric.
Like the rest of the world?
I mean, so with that, you have a base station, and so that could be your other antenna, and then you also have a rover. So you're collecting data over this one point, and then you have this rover going around throughout your area, and that's relaying distance not only to your base station, but then also all of the other GPS satellites. And so with that, you're able to apply correction in post-process.
So if I understand the workflow correctly, we're essentially shooting data, base station, rover, but then we're taking that data and applying corrections to it after the fact, maybe either via software. I forget the name of that software where people typically do it. Pathfinder, like that's for Trimble.
Yeah.
So if I understand this correctly, then what is RTK for a drone? Is that really getting the same connectivity essentially with a internet-based network like N-Trip or Cores?
Well, to get that, you have to have connection to the network. So I've heard of solutions where you're able to get the P4P RTK connected to a network, but I haven't seen it.
But that's the P4P RTK. Like, let's talk for a second about maybe the M210 RTK or the M200 RTK or the M600 RTK. That's not actually connecting to a network and providing corrections over the network, right?
No, and all that is just getting your position of your drone in a it's
more tightly kind of
yes,
confined.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Kind of more accurate positioning on your drone's location.
And typically, if I understand this correctly, the most difficult axes to correct is the z-axis, right? Elevation. Is that right?
That's where your most errors come from. So that has to go into your geiod, which is what you use to build that gravitational model or that calculate your z values.
Gotcha. Well, I think it's really interesting that we're talking here about RTK and PPK GPS. And PPK GPS, if you're not familiar, have you ever used the Aeropoints? Have you ever heard of that system where you go out and you throw those black and yellow foam markers out in the field and you leave them out there for an hour, hour and a half? Well, what that is doing is it's actually trying to aggregate data. So it's taking more and more information and kind of, honing in. It's honing in on the point.
Well, that's actually called, that's a static survey.
But with that static survey, we're still then connecting those arrow points to the propeller network and getting those corrections post-process,
right?
Which makes it PPK.
Well, that's the definition of static. Static is whenever you leave your GPS antenna over one point for a certain amount of time.
Gotcha. Good to know. Another thing that's good to know. Now, with that being said, arrow points can be really good for people, but there's obviously more points in the workflow. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Because with drone mapping, there's so much that goes into the workflow. I don't think people really truly understand the hype of certain vehicles and versus the realistic, nature of the vehicle itself. For example, right, the whole idea, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Josh, the whole idea with the Phantom 4 Pro RTK is that we essentially would not need to use GCPs or as many GCPs because it would make the process more efficient, because instead of going out, surveying our area, looking for the MoCA, laying down our GCP markers in a kind of a square and then one in the middle with equal displacement between them, and then pulling those GPS points and then essentially flying over that, processing step one, inputting our GCPs, marking the GCPs in 10 to 12 photos in a kind of like in a way that you do by changing a tire, right? All of that is really difficult in the workflow, and the Phantom 4 Pro RTK is supposed to essentially shorten that workflow by eliminating the need for GCPs. Is that right?
That's what the claim is, and so that's kind of where my issue comes in. Just because you will always need those points out in the field, and if you're not using them for ground control, which is basically using ground control is what your model is based off of.
It's how you geo-rectify your model.
Right. And then you also need to have checkpoints, which are points that you have GPS locations for without out in your project area.
without geolocating your map. So it's
Right.
essentially like saying, you know, we know this is one point in space. How close is our model to that point in space? But something that was
That's the only way you're going to be able to verify your data.
and typically you verify your data and the accuracy therein with a third-party application, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, something that I found out that was really interesting today was we're at the NTSB, we're going through the same process, and Bill was like, well, you know, if you pull your checkpoints with the same instrument that you pulled your GCPs, you're not really checking too much information because you utilize the same tool to gather points, so there could be a margin of error within the tool itself.
Yeah, and I mean that's possible because there's definitely been times that I've made. I mean, human error is one of the greatest errors within GPS because you know you could have wrong antenna height, you could press the wrong button within your GPS or within your receiver. So there's definitely you know those kind of errors that can be inputted, but mostly you can use the same equipment. I think personally, just to be able to go out and use those area points that you're going to check against.
Gotcha. So going back to all this, why is this all important, right? Well, we're talking about drone mapping workflow. Phantom 4 Pro RTK, is that really going to shorten our workflow? Are we really going to be able to eliminate GCPs? Or should we still just be shooting with the Phantom 4 Pro version 2 or Phantom 4 Pro and marking our GCPs and having checkpoints? I think the answer right now is still, uncertain. I don't have a clear answer in my mind. There are clear benefits to the Phantom 4 RTK. It is actually measuring the sensor and the distance of the camera sensor itself to the position in space. So it's essentially saying that I know there's this distortion in the lens. I know exactly how far the sensor is from the entry point of light. So I can actually say these are known values. And if these values change at all, it's going to change in the back of the EXIF data of the photo, providing even more accuracy. So I think that there are clear benefits with that, although I think we're still waiting to see really if the Phantom 4 Pro RTK is going to live up to all the hype, because is it a great value for the money? Sure, right? You don't have to buy a total station. You don't have to buy a Leica, say GS14, GS16. You don't have to buy a Trimble G7X. There's a lot of stuff that you don't have to buy if you have the Phantom 4 Pro RTK. The question just becomes, is it really RTK? Are we going to be able to eliminate GCPs? And I think the long and the short answer is almost no, because at the end of the day, we still have to verify the validity of our data. And the way that we do that is with checkpoints. So we're still going to be laying out checkpoints now.
Which then you need your RTK system, which your GS14 stuff like that. You're still going to need that to be able to collect those points. So you're still going to need it.
So it sounds like the verdict is still out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I know I kind of put you on the spot, and as you can tell, Josh doesn't like to be put on the spot. So, but anyway, I really appreciate having you on the show, man. You know, guys, we're going to be doing more and more research on these drones, these solutions for workflow, and kind of going deeper into what is the hype, what's real, what can we really get out of it. So look for that information and more. But for today, guys, that is going to do it for us. We just kind of wanted to dive deep into the workflow of mapping, dive deep into the workflow of GPS, so that a lot of you have a better understanding of terrestrial GPS versus when a drone is RTK. You have to understand that most of the time, the RTK drones are not writing EXIF data. And even on the Phantom 4 Pro RTK, we know that it's only writing RTK connected data to the photos when the camera is at nadir position.
That's all I've seen.
Yeah, and we've heard speculation that it also does it at 45 degrees, but haven't been able to ensure that that is correct or accurate yet. And then also we want to know the detail of the EXIF data. Is it really writing all the corrections for the RTK inside of that data? Are we getting real information, or is it just leaving us with a question mark of fix or float? Guess we'll find out. And we'll find out more, too, from a new guest that we're hoping to have on the show, but we will talk to him soon. Guys, that's going to do it for us today. My name is Paul, his name is Josh, and you're watching Ask Drone U.